Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. My name is Tanner Wayland, and together we're going to learn how to have condensed, fun, and manageable D&D games, whether you're a current or future DM. And today we're going to talk about kind of that condensed part of it, namely, when do you need to speed through certain parts of your campaign? And I'm not talking about just like, oh, we're just trying to get through it fast. I'm saying there are times when you feel like your game is dragging, or maybe you just need to get through a part so you can get to your next plot point that you know that the players would like more. Now, there's a few different ways this could happen. Like, okay, you're in a mediocre part of the story. Maybe you wrote a really big dungeon that you're super passionate about, but the problem is that you made it too long. And then as the players are going through and they're dungeon crawling, they're going room by room, you suddenly realize, oh, they're taking way too long for this. I can tell that the fire's kind of dying in their eyes, so to speak, and they're just not really into it. That's a great time to speed run and cut out some of those rooms. Or maybe you're planning this big old conversation with a key NPC, but the players, it just turns into kind of a slog, or maybe just too exposition heavy. And when the players get a chance to interact, to converse, they don't really take the bait. These are all kind of opportunities for you to re-examine what you have in your campaign, what you have planned, and whether or not you should actually keep it. Now, why is it so important to discuss this? It's because I think a lot of times DMs get so attached to what they created, right? In the literature world, in the writing world, have a phrase called "killing your darlings," and that's, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it before, but it's the idea that just because you worked on something and you're really passionate about it personally doesn't mean everyone else will be. And you need to be willing to cut it out, do away with it in order to benefit the overall story. And in campaigns, it's exactly the same. Like, I'll be honest, there was a town in one of my campaigns where the players just spent forever. And it had quite a number of encounters that I thought were pretty fun, but just over time, I was like, "Oh my goodness, do they even remember that they're supposed to get through this town and they're supposed to fight the big bad guy?" Because they were just worried about these small little villains and exploring every inch of the town. And it just made me realize that not everything should be a huge a huge story. Sometimes it's okay to cut out certain parts from what you planned. Sometimes it's okay uh, to scrunch it up and make it so that only they like maybe the combat suddenly the and we've talked about this before. Maybe you're like, oh, this combat's gone on too long. Suddenly the big bad, oh, this next hit kills him. Wow, amazing. Instead of, giving him that extra 50 or 100 HP, right? Um, and this especially becomes necessary when, let's say that you have a limited time for a campaign, right? Like Caden Otley, who helps us on this podcast, he he said recently, he's like, "Oh man, I'm bummed out because uh, my brother and sister-in-law, they're leaving out of town when summer comes around, and they're just going to be gone." So essentially, he has a time limit on his campaign, and when that happens, you need to make sure that the campaign's still interesting, but a lot more quality and a lot less meandering. Uh, and especially where it's like, once you become an adult, time just feels so valuable, period. So, okay, let's think about like if something's dragging, how can we change that? Um, First off, you don't want to cut out anything that's interesting. Because when I mention this idea of just speeding through certain parts, you might think like, oh, but I put so much time into this, and I was actually really excited about this certain thing. You need to examine that and be like, okay, what specifically was I excited about? If it's a certain NPC and you're like, oh, I had this funny interaction planned, then have that funny interaction and then cut it off. You don't need to. They don't need to ask your NPC 1,000 questions for them to just be like, "Oh, I don't know," or give cryptic answers because you don't want to give too much away. Learning how to cut things off is very important while keeping the essence of what you initially thought was worthwhile. Um, Also, like another thing, don't cut out any treasure. I mentioned before, like, oh, if they're doing a dungeon crawl and they're just, taking forever. And it's literally a crawl where it's room by room and session by session, and they're just, it's a slog. In cases like that, maybe there's more treasure in one room. Maybe you just combine a few rooms but only have one encounter, so to speak. Uh, if you do that, it's like you want to keep that treasure, you want to keep that, like the mysteries, the traps, the things that are more interesting, like the surprising and unique encounter, like enemy encounters, you want to keep those. Maybe you don't worry as much about having all of the random encounters that you planned, right? Maybe you had a chart and you're like, okay, every 3 rooms I roll this dice, and maybe there's an encounter of some type. Maybe instead you just cut out a bunch of rooms and have specific encounters that you're like, oh, these enemies would be very fun and unique to fight, and then you just stick to that. Now, one thing that I want to say here, if you're the kind of party that has no time constraints, like you can obviously make something a little bit more uh prolonged, whether it's a dungeon or a quest line or something like that. Because sometimes, and especially if your party really enjoys just kind of taking things as they come, then sometimes like having a slower adventure is fine. But there's a lot of times when you're probably, as a DM, you probably notice that the fire going out of your players' eyes because they're just not engaged. They're not interested. They're not, maybe they were like, oh, this is a cool druid haunt that we got going on here. And then after, it's been 4 or 5 sessions there, they're kind of done with the theme. Uh, from your DM seat, you're like, oh, they still got half this place to go. But if the players aren't having fun, then guess what? You should prioritize the fun because that's why we're playing. I mean, it is to tell good stories, it is to connect. Like those are also important. But you can connect while keeping it punchy, so to speak. And you can also tell a good story by just cutting the fluff, right? Um Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you want to change something, you want to make it feel earned. Um, what I mean by this is you don't want to suddenly just randomly change something in a way that makes the players feel like, oh, he's speeding along. Instead, give a reason, right? If you were like, oh, there's a huge castle in front of you, and you kind of lay it out earlier as if it was like when you started the castle, if you laid it out with the understanding that it was going to take forever, and you're like, oh, buckle up, it's going to take a few sessions. Um, Maybe suddenly they find a hidden door, like a trap door or something, and they fight through a really hard encounter, and then they find an NPC who guides them past a lot of it, right? That makes it feel earned. Or maybe they find, a hidden side boss or just a side boss in general who they're able to persuade or kill, and then they get a key that unlocks a door that leads to a secret passage. You know what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of ways that you don't even have to rewrite the whole map. You can just have a story reason that they can be proud of for, like, hey, because we did this, it became a lot easier and we got done a lot faster, right? You can even kind of act a little bit and be like, oh, dang it. You you foiled my plans. If only it wasn't for you meddling kids, kind of thing, right? And then of course you're just happy that, oh, we got through some of the stuff that I feel like they maybe weren't as interested in. And this is also especially true. Like I'm talking about, I mentioned the killing your darlings thing because a lot of times you have to cut your own work. But if you're doing a pre-written campaign that you got online or in one of the Dungeons and Dragons like adventure books or anything like that, you can always cut things there, right? Don't cut anything important. But if you can tell your players want kind of a faster, more direct type of adventure, don't hold back. Like cut the things that aren't necessary, and and when you do that, you should really be thoughtful about about what your players enjoy, right? If you know your party well, you'll know what to speed through. Because if they're not all, if they've never really been about having like long, meaningful, funny conversations with NPCs, maybe you don't do that as much. And also, if like, okay, 3 combats in a row, if you notice from past experience that players just kind of don't have that kind of battle stamina, so to speak, or at least mental interest, then you can stick to just one, right? And to do a lot more exploring. Keep all the traps, keep all the exploring elements, keep all the skill checks, everything like that. But just don't don't do the things that they typically struggle with, right? And if you do that, then you're going to notice that you're rarely going to feel like things are going too slow. You're rarely going to feel like your players are just, losing interest, getting distracted with their phones, anything like that, because you cut the stuff or you shorten the stuff that wasn't going to interest them in the first place. And I don't expect you to be amazing at this at the start, right? I think that we all need to realize that we're going to include fluff. That's fine. We're human, we're DMs. Unlike writing a book, we don't get to do, third, fourth, fifth drafts to cut out everything. So, just take it, like, just pay attention to your players' faces, pay attention to their reactions, and you'll be fine. So, my hope for you is that you go out and you make time to review your next session, and when you do, take a look at the things that maybe are extra or the things that you didn't perhaps plan or define as clearly as you could have. And just do that so that you can have a much punchier session. And then you're going to be able to have, you're going to have kind of a benchmark, so to speak. You'll see, like, okay, I used to run games like this where I wasn't worried about the fluff. But now I'm trying to speed through the less fun parts to get to the fun parts. And if you do that, at least for the next couple of sessions, then you're going to build up kind of a sense for what isn't the most important to the party's fun. And I hope that you have an amazing experience doing that. And then check in with your players. See if they enjoyed that. See if they enjoyed the increased pace, or if they kind of want to slow down, if they like to take their time and really smell the roses, so to speak. And if that happens, that's fine. The goal of this kind of principle of speeding through the drudgery isn't to restrict you at all. It's just to make it more fun for the players. So do whatever's funnest for them. Do whatever they're most interested in. And if they like something slow, do slow. But at least try speeding up to see if you can get some increased energy from your players and increased and increased interest. I hope that you have a wonderful time doing this. And until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First, tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay, all right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/subscribe/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, creating sarcasm, puns, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.